gone live. Oh, you're live now, and I'm.
Oh my goodness.
Fun and games. I'm sorry about that. If anyone's been waiting, we were having a few technical hitches. The gremlins got into the system, but we are finally here. So I do hope you stayed because it was stressful, Mary, wasn't it? And anyway, we're here to discuss the launch of Mary's new brilliant book, Death at Castle Cove. Which I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of, so I have already read and love it. But I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Mary's other books. This one is the first in a new series, brand new series, and it's the first series that Mary's done, so that's really exciting. And this is we're going for cozy crime as opposed to whodunit, more cozy crime than whodunit, and it's Mary's 7th novel. And on that note, I am going to, and you've got some amazing reviews because I've just been looking at your reviews. Superb writing. I didn't guess till the end, or that kind of comment coming through. So Mary, what's the difference between a whodunit and cozy crime? And we've talked a bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, actually, and I'll try not to go on too long about it because not everybody finds this fascinating. But Anne Williams, in her blog review of Death at Castle Cove, she actually discussed it a little bit because, as she said, she went down the rabbit hole of finding out what was cozy crime. Now, I would say it's a huge umbrella. I'm somewhere in the middle, I would guess. I think I'm towards cozy crime in that I have no explicit violence, sex, that kind of thing. It's quite gentle in that way. But also the murder and whodunit is actually very, very important. Sometimes in a cozy crime, if you see them on telly, like Death in Paradise, the crime can almost become peripheral because you're so interested in all the characters and what they're doing. And I love a lot of the sort of very light cozy crime, like Agatha Raisin, and I just love all that sort of thing. I wouldn't say I'm much more towards the Agatha Christie end of cozy crime, in that the plot and the real fun for me is trying to hide who the killer is, and for the reader, I hope the fun is actually working out who the killer is, and that's at the nub of it, really.
Yeah, and I had a real job to work this one out. In fact, this is in some ways, it's the closest that I've got because I've never been able to work out your before.
Don't say.
No spoilers from me. And I loved it because of that. I mean, it seems to me that yes, obviously you're always going to set up that everyone could possibly have a motive, and I just love trying to work it out and trying to get the clues. I mean, I know that you had clues are pretty tricky to place, but I know that we had a question before we started doing this from Judy Lee talking about red herrings. So on the subject of red herrings, how do you do that? How do you place red herrings? And obviously within the clues, how do you do that?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one, really. It comes a bit back down to the plotting or pouncing type thing, really. I tend to start off with a plot, and but this changes a lot as I'm writing, and then the red herrings either come out of the plot. I mean, like at the moment, I'm writing the next book in the series, and I would say, like, I had an idea for the killer, but then I thought everyone's going to guess that motive, so I'm going to use that motive as a red herring. So then I put another layer under it, and then another layer under that, and it's all about layering, really. I think, really. The other thing is, when sometimes you want, I've always play fair. Everything you need to know is in the book, and it's hard because you're trying to hide that. So sometimes you hide that under something that's bigger, and a good red herring. What you hope is the new shiny thing people will go to, and not see the obvious. Really. What to me seems very obvious, but hopefully you're hiding it away. So I would say I pluck some of them at the beginning. Some of them I add as I go along, and some I add in after when I get to the end as well. So try to
Your
have lots.
your books are very, very layered. You know, I think there's just what's one of the things I love about them. It's just layer upon layer upon layer. And yes, I wondered about that, how you do that, how because there seems to be so many things. Every so often I'm reading one of your books and I think that's definitely a clue. That's definitely going to come in later. And I guess, and usually, you know, we're right because you've made it obvious enough that that's a clue. But I love that idea about the red herrings. They make a motive that would be obvious into a red herring. Brilliant. Okay, right. I wanted to ask you a couple of things about the settings, actually. I mean, you obviously use the Isle of Wight as your setting, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
But lots of your place names sound real. And like, for example, is the Spyglass and Kettle, because you mentioned that quite a bit in this one, is that a real
The Spyglass Inn is a real place. What I tend to do is like Ventnor is based in the town of Ventnor, which is a Victorian seaside town on the island, and that is real. When it gets to the particulars, if it's a small village or something, I tend to rename them because then it's very obvious, like you have the pharmacy or whatever in there. And I don't want people ever thinking that I've based any character on a real person because they're all fictitious. So I will make up names sort of using bits of island names, like in this one I'm writing at the moment, I've called the place Bishopstone. Stone is often at the end of a lot of island names. So I sort of pop that on at the end of something. Or so for villages, I make them up. For the big towns like Newport and Ventnor, I keep them because they're just such, you know, people. I think people like some real names because they say, "Oh, I can imagine that. I went there when I was a child, or whatever, or I live here."
And I think that's a good trick, actually, to use a name that's associated with that place. So it sounds authentic, then, doesn't it? So, but you wouldn't actually use an actual place like an actual pub, then? Would you do that?
Well, Spyglass is actually a very famous pub in Ventnor, and because that storyline doesn't involve the publican or anything, anybody who people would know, that's fine. I'm just using it's two fictitious people meeting there, so that's fine. It's not going to be a problem for anybody, that, and it's such an amazing place. It really is worth visiting anyway. That it's a lovely setting for a scene anyway.
So presumably, if you were going to have an actual murder there, that you wouldn't have it in an actual place.
Well, you see, Castle Cove exists. A death at Castle Cove, but you see, then that's not anybody's home, or it's not connected with a person, because you've got Steeple Cove, which is really well, it's better known anyway, and then Castle Cove, you just come around the corner and you find Castle Cove. So that's a real place, and the plinth that is described in the prologue, that exists, and you can see it if you go down there.
Yes,
the story.
That makes total sense, actually, but because yeah, obviously, if you had an actual murder in a real place, it could be a little bit tricky. But I do the same things with my books. Not that I have murders in my books as a rule.
No, but
no. Yet.
Not yet.
But obviously, in a cove, yes, that's brilliant. And of course, yeah, we don't want to go too much into that, but it is called Death at Castle Cove, so I don't think too many spoilers on that one.
No.
So, one of my questions, and I'm going to ask this one because I'm a bit of a dog lover, but you have ever such a lot of dogs. You have a dog walking group in this story, and I just wondered, and I know you haven't got a dog, so what inspired you to do that, to put in lots of dogs?
Yes, well, I started off with I did have a dog. I had a Cocker Spaniel, and through him I met lots of people, and I met I'd never had a dog before, and I'd not realised what was involved, really. Well, I knew quite a lot in actual looking after the dog. What I hadn't realised is that all the people you meet when you're out there, and the whole dog walking community, and online as well, I've met there's a book called there's a group called Cocker Spaniels on Facebook, and I've got friends there, people who've now come over and brought their Cocker Spaniels over to the island and things through that, and that was the most amazing plus from having a dog that I didn't realise. Even now, unfortunately, we don't have Pepper now. I meet up for coffee and things, and still see all my dog walking friends. So yeah, I think just dogs. I think there's a sort of little bond. I think what it does, dog walkers, they come from all over, all different backgrounds, and it's a sort of great equalizer, really, because nobody's dog is perfect either. And I think it's a bit like when you've got toddlers. There's a
Yeah.
sort of you're all got one thing in common, but you've got people from a vast amount of backgrounds, and it makes a really lovely group to use actually for this sort of story.
Yeah, and of course, I've noticed in your book, all of your dogs are very well behaved. Where
they are a bit, aren't they? I was thinking that.
whereas in my world, I've got a dog that isn't very well behaved. So, but they can obviously all talk and chat, and their dogs all just do their own thing. But their personalities are brilliant, and that's because you base them on real dogs from the dog group.
Yeah, it's partly from people I know from dog walking, but also people I've met online. I sometimes say, "Would you like your dog to be in this?" And most people, well, everybody always loves it actually, and it's nice. So then they tend to send me a photo of their dog and tell me things that they know about. I don't try to. I always say, basically, I'm using their name and their breed. I don't pretend to know their dog because I can't. I don't know their dogs that well, but I get as much information as I can and make, if they've got funny little ways or something, I try to include that so that when their owners read it, they say, "Oh yeah, that's my dog," So yeah, it's nice, and people really love it. Actually, they get quite emotional about having their dog in a book, which is lovely.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm slightly alarmed that we haven't had any comments, so I don't know if that
No, I'm
means
wondering.
no one is here
that.
and we're just talking. But never mind. Well, we'll just carry on as if there's lots
Maybe
of
you
people.
could ask Marcella if anybody's here.
We see, because normally we would have had a couple of comments by now, I would have
Yeah.
thought. But anyway, well, we'll just carry on, and
Yeah, because people will be watching it later, I suppose.
yeah, because we've had obviously a few technical, we've had quite a few technical hitches. Oh, there are people watching. Oh, well, that's really nice. Well,
there are. Oh, that's lovely.
Mary and I have had quite a few. Oh, thank you, Grace. We've had quite a
Hello,
few.
Grace.
So far. Brilliant. Thank you for waiting and being patient as well, Grace. Okay, right. What I wanted to ask you next was about Susan, actually.
Oh,
now,
yes.
Susan is your main character. And she didn't strike me as being your usual kind of character. She was more maternal. I'd like to go more maternal than usual, or maybe a bit older. And I wondered what your inspiration for Susan was.
Yeah, actually, it was a really conscious decision. All my main characters in all the other novels have been, I would say, in their 30s and 40s, and mums of young children quite often. And I thought, here I am at 65, and how about writing somebody my age as a main character? And so I really set about it thinking, right, and it was lovely because I sort of slot into it, and there's little bits of me in it, but there's little bits of lots of older ladies, I suppose, that I know, and older women, and I have got points to prove with it, really. I think because I feel that sometimes when you get over like 60s, you can become a little bit invisible, and not just that, it's like your history can become invisible. People see normally about sort of, you can appear very conforming and very friendly and kind, and all those things are lovely and good, and they make society work. But also, there's a history to you, and that can get forgotten. And like with Susan, she went to Greenham Common, and she's actually quite a little rebel. She was a rebel. She fights for. She's always fought for the corner, and she still fights. And I think people like another thing people assume is that you get more narrow-minded as you get older, and that's not true at all. And I think a lot of older people have actually seen a lot of life and are actually very giving and very understanding of different ways of living and different choices people make. So I wanted to, through Susan, really, to say, "Oi, as older older women, are still out there fighting, and we have lots of new ideas, new thoughts. We have hopes and dreams, and Susan has. I mean, Susan in this book, when it opens, her husband has just left her, and she is actually starting again at 62. I think she's the first book. She's 62, and her husband has just sat down. Well, like 2 years before, I'd said, "I'm taking early retirement." He's a doctor, and I'm going off sailing. And it may sound extreme, but unfortunately, it happens when people come into retirement or whatever, and they suddenly like reevaluate their life. And he did it quite harshly, and yet she doesn't. She is devastated, but she doesn't collapse, and she is making a new life for herself. And this little romance is on the edge, and she's deciding, hang on a minute, do I really want? Because she's quite independent, and maybe that history, that early her, is actually sort of having a chance to come back again. So it's quite exciting.
I like Susan a lot. And one of the things I liked about her is that she's not a shrinking violet. She doesn't just lay down quietly. She refuses to take no for an answer. So, and actually giving her that backstory as you've given her makes all that very believable, I felt. Just quickly to break off to say hi to Jan and
hello.
And Ian. I'm not surprised you had trouble finding us, Ian. We had trouble getting here.
Yes.
Jan said actually that your descriptions of places and dogs are so vivid. They're all vital characters. I so agree with that. Your descriptions of the Isle of Wight bring them to life. They really bring them to life. And also with Susan being your older woman character, it's a real yes, we want to read about older women. Being an older woman myself,
and also, you've got Alice, who's 91, who is her partner and who's going to be in the series. And I love Alice because I've always wanted to have my own Miss Marple, really. And she's my Miss Marple, living in. And again, you've got an older, she's the next generation. That's the thing. People sort of say old people like it's for big, but she's actually like 30 years older than Susan. So, it's a different generation. There are generations within the title of older people. And yet, she's got these little arthritic hands and everything. And yet her brain is bright, and she has a different way of looking at things. If anything, I would say a more incisive look at things than Susan. She's lived longer and she's seen more, and her life, and this is where she reminds me a bit of a Miss Marple in it, that she was the shop. She ran the shop in the village where Susan is living in book 2, and so what she's got to know is people, and people are people, aren't they? I like that. Yes, I agree, Jan.
Alice is superb. I loved Alice. I love the fact that the first time Susan goes and sees Alice, Alice is like she like you say, she just pares away all of the irrelevant detail, to be honest, and goes straight into the heart of the matter, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And thanks very much, Jan. We like that. Yeah, I mean, I like that. I'm definitely not an older 60-year-old at all.
No, I don't feel it, and that's the thing. I don't think anybody does, and I think it's quite hard sometimes. Hello, Judy, hello, Jan. Right? I think when you have to tick those boxes, you have to keep scrolling down to find your date of birth when it says when you were born or something. You think you're going a long way back. That's when I might start feeling older, but I don't in everyday life at all. I might do when I try to run for a bus, but that's about it.
You just faded out a little bit there, Mary.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's
yes,
better.
that was me sitting back too far. Yeah.
So what were you saying about older women?
I said, I don't think anybody feels older. I remember Maureen Lipman in one of her books saying everybody stays about 25 in their head. And I think she might have a point. And I think it's important. And actually, it's lovely, Judy Lee. I mean, her books, they're really trying to shout for the older woman as well, to say, look, you know, we have hopes, dreams, we have, you know, aspirations, you know, and I think it's important we shout about it, actually.
Yes, and we still have a value as well, and that's massively important. And also, I love the fact that we're sort of, I think societies years and years ago, we respected our elders, and there was much more value, it seems to me, attached to elders. And I think we're going back that way, so that we have the older matriarchs particularly, and that's what I mean. So you're going to do a series with, and Alice is going to be in it. I didn't realize that.
She's in it more in the next one, actually, because I felt like what happened, you see, when I started writing Death at Castle Cove, it was just going to be a one-off. And then Susan met Alice. She met Robert, the ex-policeman, the romance. And I suddenly thought, you know, this could run. And I don't want to let these people go yet. So really, Alice and all are coming into their own more, I would say, in the next book. I hope so, because she's great. She's really good. Hello, Helen.
I like Ian's comment. I've been 39 for 25 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think this might be a good time for you to read us a bit of your book, maybe the prologue, because the prologue.
Yeah, it's not very long, everybody. It's okay. It's not too long. Here we are. I think it's just, it's quite short. I hadn't really set out to do this, but every one of my books seems to start off with a sort of like a prologue from the mind, from the point of view of the killer. So here we go. Prologue. This is a secret place, safe and cozy by day, but tonight it feels isolated and eerie. Not many people know of Castle Cove. Inaccessible to cars, it is one of those hidden, magical places here on the island. Enormous boulders have been placed to protect the land from the waves that crash into and erode it. And yet Colette, huddled among them, appears vulnerable and alone on this cold October evening. Suddenly, her white blonde hair catches the wind. I don't need to see her face to be reminded of how much her beauty hurts me. She is a fool to be down here on her own. However, she is oblivious to the threat gathering in the sea salt air, making it too easy for me. If only she'd stayed away from the island, left me alone with my secrets and my past. But she came, and she won't stop digging until all my secrets have been clawed out. She has left me no option. She has to die.
Oh,
So,
I love that. One of the things I love about your writing is that the places just spring to life, and your atmosphere. You have this way of creating this really tense atmospheric situation. I love that line about the flash of her blonde hair, because I could see her in that line, and the line about the beauty, really brilliant prologue.
Thank you.
And yes, draws you straight in. And I want to ask you actually about prologues. You say that why do you use prologues? Why did you use one for this?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I did quite a lot of writing courses and things before I started writing novels, and prologues were very much not seen as a thing to do, really. And yet, I like going into the mind of the killer, and I think starting off is a good way. So it tends to be like, sometimes the prologue will be set, at the most it's a day or two after the actual start in chapter 1. It's never, they're not masses apart, but it's just to give people a feel of where we're going, I suppose, with the book. Because I think that's right, because with a whodunit, what you have to do at the beginning is make sure you introduce basically your suspects and your victim. And it's tradition, really, that the suspect, you meet all the suspects in the first few chapters. Now, that's great, but the most gripping thing is going to be the murder. And I think what you want is say, look, this is what's going to come in a minute. So get to know these people, because one of them is thinking this. And that's, I quite like that as a way to start.
And it worked really well. It's a brilliant way to start. And I mean, all of your prologues, they stick in my mind. Actually, you're very good at writing them. They're very visual. They really set it up. They throw us straight into the action as well. So fantastic. So, who's your favourite character in this novel? Would you say?
Now, I had a long think about this one, and at the end of the day, you know, I come down to Susan. I think because usually, whenever everybody asks me this in a book, and I don't know whether other authors think this, I often think of a quite a minor character. Because I know in Good Neighbours there was Jade, who was not the main character at all, but I just got so fond of her. But I think with Susan, and this is the reason it's a series, really, I suppose, is because Susan, I feel like I'm just really starting to get under her skin and getting to know her properly, and it's and I've got a lot more to find out about her as well, because I think she's on a journey, so she is going to change. So yeah, I'd say Susan, actually. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if you have some competition in the form of Alice.
yeah. I think a lot of people were warm to Alice, actually. I think she's
once we get to know Alice a bit.
Yeah,
because I don't know what it is about. I love older women characters.
Actually, you do, actually, because you have that love. I've forgotten her name. The older.
Oh, Maggie, probably.
Yeah, Maggie. Yeah, I think there's a character, isn't there, to them, and a depth maybe to them, and a no nonsense as well.
Yeah, and like you say, they have a life, you know, they have a background. And obviously that's one of the things I loved about Susan. And I love the fact that she fends off romantic advances in this book. Because all the way through I'm thinking, well, is she going to or isn't she? And I love how she was, you know, when she meets up with her ex as well, actually. Very believable, I thought.
Shall I tell you a secret, actually?
Yeah.
I don't really know where that's going either, because I feel like I'm inside Susan now. And I'm thinking, does she want a relationship with Robert or not? And actually, Steve's coming back in book 2 a bit more. And so he might have a few regrets about what he's done. And so she's got quite a lot of decisions to make, which would be interesting.
Yeah, and Judy said Judy's fascinated to see how Robert will develop. I was, because I was like, is Robert a goodie or a baddie? I couldn't make up my mind.
Well, he was. The thing is, in book 1, is he's a suspect, isn't he? So for a little bit. So I had to sort of keep him a little bit under wraps. We'll see a bit more of him now.
Yeah, and Steve, of course, Steve the ex, because again, I felt very ambiguous towards Steve. I was like, part of me was thinking, I really don't like him, and another part of me was like, actually, I do feel for him.
Well, I mean, he did a horrible thing, but they had been married 40 years, so there was something, and they'd fostered children together, they'd had children, and they had a good life, you see. And I think, you know, that doesn't just go away, does it?
No, that's very clear in your novel, actually. I love that about it, because they're not black and white characters. They're not just stereotypes.
Well, life isn't, is it? No, life's complicated.
No. They're not cardboard cutouts at all. And so in this novel, I felt that your characters were more developed in this novel, perhaps because it's a series, perhaps because you know that you're going to take them forward. I mean, this is a question I actually nicked from you, but do you prefer writing baddies or goodies?
Yeah, I had to think about that one, and I think it's cheating really to say both, but I do. What I do like, I like thinking about the killer. I think in the heart of a whodunit, right, is your killer, and you have to have somebody quite unique Unfortunately, most people don't resolve problems in their life by killing people. And so whatever motive you give your killer, there has to be what I think of almost like an X factor, but not in a good way. Because most people, even if they want the money or they want the partner or they want revenge, they don't kill. There's something, fortunately, in the heart of all of us that stops us killing to get our way. But for some people, they go over that line. So what I find absolutely fascinating when I'm trying to work out who the killer is A, why they did it, but B, why, what was in them that took that thing and made them go over the line. And that I find that's absolutely fascinating. And I spend hours reading online and in books and things about real crime and things, because I find it fascinating. And that doesn't mean I condone it either. And that's one of the things I like about Agatha Christie, actually. She never tries to glamorize the fact somebody has taken somebody else's life. And so when I get to the end and a killer is revealed, I don't want them to be a glamorous figure at all. They have had the nerve and the terrible thing that has made them feel they have a right to take somebody's life. Now, that also is very serious for somebody who writes Kosher crime, but I think at the end of the day, you've got to face the fact you are talking murder here, and whatever else has happened, somebody's lost their life, whether they're however nice or awful they are. So, sorry, that was a bit serious, but
You're right. I think you're absolutely right. We do have some obligation, some like moral obligation, as authors, I think, writing in this genre, writing in any genre, even if it is fiction. And you always do that as well, by the way. What you said at the beginning, you don't glamorize your killers. When we get to the end and they're unmasked, and they're usually in a lot of trouble, and they're usually they're definitely not glamorous. Anyway, put it that way. I love that. You always do that. So you've got that absolutely spot on, I'd say.
Thank you. I see Nikki has come along and she said, I've got my pen and paper ready. Nikki wrote a most amazing review of Death at Castle Cove. And she said in that when she read this, she sat with pen and paper writing down the clues to see if she could. So she's my challenge for the next book, because I want to beat you again, Nikki. I like to get you.
Brilliant. So my next question is, seeing as no one's actually asking us any questions, hint, hint, guys. Let's have some questions.
I think everybody's just saying, phew, I got here.
We'll give them that, actually.
Yeah.
What is your favourite and your least favourite bit of writing a novel?
Well, my favourite bit is plotting, and that's not just before I write. I love going back, and I have to sometimes stop myself going more and more down because I can go on forever. I do love plotting, and although it sort of turns me grey, which is why I'm dyed hair. I love plotting, and I like thinking of different ways and reasons and the motives and all that sort of stuff. I love that. The most difficult thing for me is writing the first draft. I love editing, and I love going over it again and adding what I think of as magic, really. But I have to stop myself always going back to plot, and I have to get the words down. That can be my problem.
On that note, actually, I just want to quickly ask you this: what comes first when you're writing a crime novel? Is it the crime that comes first, or the character? What comes first?
Well, with Death at Castle Cove, what came first was the setting, because I'm a West White person, and although everybody thinks of the island as tiny, actually living in the West White it feels miles over to the other side. But actually, we said, let's go mad and go over to Ventnor. We haven't been there for a long time. And we did the walk from the beach down to Steep Hill Cove, which is one of the first things that happens in the book. And I looked at Castle Cove and I said, this is where I want the next story to happen. And that's where it started. So it started with setting, and then characters, really. And Susan came along, and then the murder sort of comes further along the line in some ways. Although with the one I'm writing now, the murder came first. So, you know. Depends.
So going across to Nikki, thank you. This question from Nikki: do you always know your killer from the start, or do they emerge as you go?
They emerge as I go. I always start off, before I start writing, I have a complete plan of the book, which is actually quite funny when I look at it in the end, because normally the book looks nothing like it. But as I go along and get to know people, you know, I said earlier about that X factor. I have to find that in a character, and sometimes I'm going along and I'm thinking, nah, I can't see it with this person. Then I see it and I think, yeah, there's more to you than meets the eye. Ooh. And gradually, yeah, then I start to know. About halfway through, I would say I know.
And do you ever change incidentally? I mean, do you ever get do you think, right, I know who it is, and then do you ever revert and come back on that?
No, normally if I've got about halfway through and I know, even if I change my mind, I'll go back to them, because there's something about that person that's made me realise. You know what it's like when you're writing, you get to know people as you're writing, and slowly you think, oh yeah, you're the one.
Okay, interesting that is. Helen is asking, how long does it take you to write a book?
Too long, would say my editor. It takes about 7-8 months to write a book, but I wish I was quicker. I'm too slow, and I wander off too much. But I try different things out, and I am too slow. But about 7 months. Like that.
Is that to include the plotting, or is that the actual writing?
Both, really, because the plotting would probably at the beginning take me about a couple of weeks, and then I start writing, then I go back to plotting, then I go back to writing, then I go back to plotting, and so my life going back and forth. Then I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite.
So there
this is why I'm so slow.
No, I don't think so, because it's organic, isn't it? You have an organic development, and actually, it doesn't matter about the speed, because some things are, you know, I don't think it matters. I think we all have our own speed, and that's our own pace.
It is what it is, isn't it? And I can't write anything now. I just express beyond.
So Carol's asking, how many other authors' books do you read, and how do you not find yourself taking inspiration from them? That's a good one.
That's a really good question, actually, because I do read a lot of crime. I love crime, and I love women's fiction and historical fiction. Those are the 3 genres I read most in. Yeah, I can understand why you would worry about whether you're going to pick up ideas, but once you start writing your own book and your own characters, it becomes totally different. They say that you could give 2 writers exactly the same subject, don't they? And they will produce 2 different works. And so I don't find that. Usually if I read a really good crime book, I think, I might think, I wish I'd written that because it's so good. But probably technically for getting ideas, I would go to Agatha Christie, because I think I've read all the Miss Marples and Poirots so many times now that I'm sort of a bit outside. I'm not, well, mind you, I am capable of still forgetting who did it, but I do look to generally, and I'm working out more what she's doing and how she's done that. So, and I think with her not being a present day writer, I feel that's fair. I wouldn't want to do that to a present day writer. That wouldn't feel fair.
And Ian saying, what's your favourite part of the process?
My favourite part, well, is the plotting.
Yeah.
And things that, honestly, publication day was just gorgeous this time. I mean, it's always, I didn't sleep the night before, because you don't know how things are going to go. But it's lovely when people come back and say nice things about your book. It's just really emotional and gratifying, because you don't know, really. Not at the end of the day. You're totally in people's hands whether they're going to enjoy what you've written or not. And then when people say nice things and say they've enjoyed it or whatever, it's just wonderful. So that's a really nice side of it as well, I think.
Going sort of touching back on the what do you like to read, I know you said what you like to read, but do you actually read while you're writing your own novels, or do you not read anything while you're writing, while you're actually doing the writing, just out of curiosity?
No, I read. Sometimes I might read a different genre, but I always read every night. It's my way of escaping the world and settling down to sleep, really. Like at the moment I'm reading Judy Collins writing as Eleanor. Sorry, what's the name? Eleanor. Oh, sorry. Anyway, it's her book, The Lady of the Loch, and it is magical. It is wonderful. So, I mean, yes, I do. I keep reading.
Yeah, I find it's tricky, because I have this worry. Oh, thank you. It's Eleanor Collins.
Thank you.
Only because we're live and you always, everything flies out.
Yeah, everything goes blank. Yeah.
Thanks, Judy. That is, yeah, I find if I read anything of someone else's when I'm writing, I'm worried that I might get their voice in my work, because I don't know, I have that worry. So I'd have to read something completely different when I was actually writing a book.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. I have, I read things like James Herrick books and things as well, which are so totally different. I'm not going to pick up his voice,
I never read James Herrick.
Cows in the middle. Definitely can't go over my. So, no, it's I love reading, and I couldn't imagine going very long without reading.
Yeah. So get that. So if you had to, well, I'm going to ask you about advice for aspiring crime novelists, but just before I ask you that, if you had to go back and pick, I don't know, someone who really inspired you to write crime, who would it be? What novelist would it be?
Well, I think it would probably be Agatha Christie.
Yeah.
I wrote my first 3 books were I self-published, and they were women's fiction, and I loved writing them. Really, really loved writing them. And it was my brother actually who said to me, "When are you going to write a whodunit then, Mary? When are you going to do an Agatha Christie?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. It frightens me to death." And but I thought, okay, I'll give it. I'll try. And so I read a few books about writing it, and then I wrote The House Party, and that's what I sent in, and boom, picked it up. So, and then I was well and truly writing crime. So yeah, that's how I ended up. Sorry, I've forgotten the question now.
Oh no, I was asking about your the author that had influenced you in crime, and you said
so I would say it was Agatha Christie, really. But I also, I loved all the lighter cozy crime as well, Simon Brett and people like that. I think, do you remember, Della? You said once, remember, writing is about entertainment. And yeah, I have got some serious things going on in my head when I'm writing, but I think it's really important what people want to do, and what I want to do when I lie down with a book is find myself somewhere else, and hopefully in a world where things work out. Because in love, in real life,
Yeah.
not very. But in a book, I want a book that's where it's going to tell me things work out. Actually.
Yeah. Absolutely, because yeah, if I was to read a crime novel and at the end the baddie got away with it and everyone died, say, I would be horrified. That would be terrible. But have you any advice for aspiring crime novelists, or indeed people who are already writing it?
I think I would say it's like the general rules, really. Write something you really love, because writing a book takes a long time. You're going to be in that place. So put yourself in a world you want to be in. Write about things you like reading, really, and the type of crime you like reading. Like, I couldn't write certain sorts of crime because they're not the sort of thing I would read. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just not the sort. I'm not very good with, for example, with violence. Yeah. Even though I write murders. So you have to find the place that you're comfortable with. Don't try to follow whatever trend is going, because that's come and gone probably by the time you finish writing your novel. I can remember when I sent the house party into Boldwood. When I wrote it, what I wanted to do actually was combine women's fiction with like a whodunit. That was my aim, and I thought, but this isn't a proper genre. And then I read this really good thing about submitting your book that said, don't try to tell them your genre, say what you're trying to do. So that's what I did. I said, I'm trying to write women's fiction and whodunit. And because they said your publisher or your agent they'll know where it fits. And so that's what happened. So
wow.
That's what I'm trying to do at the end of the day, I think.
And that's what you did when you approached Boldwood.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It's exactly what I wrote. This is what I'm trying to do, because I'd had sort of like two strong influences, and one was Joanna Trollope and her early novels, and Agatha Christie, which sounds very odd, but that's where I was sort of coming from.
No, and I think actually it's getting more and more popular, like doing that slightly cross-genre thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, people don't think in genres. It's only us who think in genres.
Yeah.
Well, and also they'll read one thing one day and another. Yeah. Which is what I think, like what Judy's doing is brilliant, because she's writing different genres. And that's just brilliant, because I love all her books. And actually, there's an interesting question here, Della, that says, from Nikki, saying, how much do blog tours help?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to answer that, because I think bloggers work so flipping hard. They work so hard reading and writing the reviews. And they're honestly, sometimes I read good reviews. Like when I say good reviews, well, hopefully they're nice about the book, but I mean thoughtful. And I think, God, they put that better than I did about that character or something like that. They've summed them up.
Yeah.
Because they have this enormous wealth of reading behind them, reading far more than I ever read. So, I have enormous respect and admiration for bloggers, and I think they make a huge difference in promoting your book, because I think, like the last few days, sharing what bloggers have said about the book, definitely people come back, and I see people write on their pages and on their blogs and on Twitter saying, oh, thanks Nikki, or whatever. I'll yes, keep going, Nikki. I'll look that one up and things. And finally, it is absolutely like lifeblood to an author to get this sort of feedback, because it's tough out there. When you put your book out, it's tough, and anybody can read and anybody can comment, which is lovely, absolutely lovely, and quite right. But it is lovely to have these bloggers who are real experts in their field, to take time. And if one of these people come back to you and say, this is good, or even this is the best you've done so far, well, it means absolutely the world. And actually, it's the lifeblood to writing. It keeps you going. It keeps you going on the next one. So I can't praise you all highly enough, actually. Thank you.
That's so true. And can I add the same? I mean, we've got to stop in a minute, I know, because we're nearly to time. But I'd love to say thank you so much to all the bloggers and reviewers out there, because it's massive. Like Mary just said, you can't imagine how important it is and how heartwarming it is to see.
Heartwarming is the word.
And thank you to you, Mary, because this book's like bounced out into the world, and you've already got loads of good reviews, and I think I can't wait to read the next book in the series. And thank you for everyone else for joining us today.
Thanks ever so much. It's not been easy getting here. And anybody who catches it, I know at least 3 people who are going to be watching this afterwards, so hi to you all. And thank you for watching after.
And we'll say goodbye for now. Thank you so much.
Bye then. Bye everybody. Bye-bye.